Hello, everyone. Yesterday was World Women's Day, so I'm very happy to chat today with a young woman I found out about very recently, actually, but whose journey really inspires me. Not only is she one of my PADI co-ambassadors, but she's also a film producer, author, photographer, freediver, spearfisher, and most impressively, a solo backpacker advocating for women seeking adventure just like her everywhere she goes. Welcome, Pier Nirandara.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me, Julia.
So I have to be honest, preparing this interview was quite tricky because you're doing so many things and you've done so many things, you've been so many places. There's too much to cover all in this interview. So let's start at the very beginning. You're based in Los Angeles right now, but you were born and raised in Thailand, where you started scuba diving at the age of 8, just like me. I saw you started in a pool, but do you remember the feeling of your first breath in the ocean, and was it at the same age?
I love that you ask about that because I'm sure like a lot of other girls out there, I grew up desperately wanting to be a mermaid and wanting to live underwater. I still remember just taking that first breath and feeling like, wow, this might be possible. I think even prior to being 8, prior to that pool dive, there was a time when we were in on some islands in Thailand, and my mom got to go do one of those, discover scuba diving days where she just went into the ocean, and I was too young to do that. And I remember being, I don't think I'd ever been that jealous before in my entire life, just the fact that she got to go in the water. So ever since then, I've been adamant about like, I need to get into the water. I need to know what it's like to be underwater.
Oh yeah, well my sister did it. I remember they wanted to let me try it a little bit. I was a little bit too young, just breathe through the regulator. And I did not want to do it. I said, I want to do it, but without the tank. I didn't want to carry the tank, but then I did it when I was 8. It was a birthday surprise and I absolutely loved it. I've never stopped since. So you also got into photography through your father and grandfather's love as well. I read you
Mhm.
seriously started to practice this hobby when you were a teenager. What were your favorite subjects back then? Were you already into wildlife and landscapes?
Yeah, so I've been very fortunate in that I've got into scuba dive since I was a young age and just grew up, as same as you, I guess. And we grew up in the tropics, right? The ocean is warm and
Yes.
beautiful and lovely. And also just really always loved landscape photography. But it wasn't until probably about 3 or 4 years ago that I started mending the two together. So having the love of landscape photography and wildlife and animals, and then putting that with the underwater world. And I got my first kind of like big underwater housing and went on a trip to the Socorro Islands off of the coast of Mexico, and have just been hooked ever since. In terms of it's a completely different world down there, and so challenging to photograph not just moving animals, but moving animals underwater. It's kind of putting together all these different skill sets, and it becomes its own thing.
Do you have any tips for the beginner that I am when taking underwater photos?
Totally. I mean, I also started like with a I was like a GoPro warrior, right? And then I remember I had a little, I think it was a Sony RX100 that was in a little tiny housing that I took to Mexico once to do the cenotes, and was just like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. I want to be able to capture exactly what this looks like and be a little bit more creative. So I needed a more powerful camera. I mean, I think the most important thing is like, yes, gear is important, but it's way more important to be a better diver, especially if you're focusing on underwater. And if you're dealing with animals, to make sure that you're not really like chasing the animals, you're kind of letting them come to you and letting them feel comfortable with you, which is actually how I really got into free diving. Is because, as much as I love scuba, when you sound like Darth Vader underwater breathing, some animals are going to be a little nervous. Like hammerhead sharks, for example, look at that and they're like, I don't know what that is. I'm not going to go close to it. But if you're free diving, you're silent and you're in their turf and you're just able to be a lot more still. And so that can get you closer to the animals too. So for me, first and foremost is being a good diver, a comfortable diver, being respectful of the environment around you, and then just really learning your gear and learning how to use it on land first so that it's almost second nature to you underwater. And then I mean, I'm pretty much entirely self-taught, just like perusing the internet. And it's an amazing, amazing resource to have now, watching YouTube
Yeah.
videos, reaching out to people like myself or just other photographers out there that you admire. And yeah, just asking them how they did it.
You grew up loving listening to stories and legends and reading. Harry Potter, like many other kids around the world, is one of
Yes.
your heroes, as you particularly like fantasy worlds and mythology, to the point that you wrote a book and got published at 15 years old, which is crazy, under the pen name of Pierretta Dawn. Your
Mhm.
interspecies trilogy, I think it's
Yeah.
ends up #1 national best-selling book, making you Thailand's youngest English author. How did you find the inspiration? Knowing the first book was named The Mermaid's Apprentices, I can't help thinking your scuba diving experience might have inspired you.
You're completely right, Julie. It totally did. I mean, I've always wanted to scuba dive, but the fact that I was writing about mermaids and writing about the underwater world, it was really important for me to kind of do research and know exactly how I wanted to portray these landscapes and this fantasy world, right? So, getting scuba certified, I remember I got certified in Thailand and then did my first kind of major diving trip to the Maldives because from Thailand, you would be able to fly directly over there or flying through Sri Lanka. So it wasn't that far away for us. And just being completely enamored by the world. And we actually had our first book launch at this aquarium, which was at that time the largest aquarium in Southeast Asia. And we had people dress up as mermaids and swim through the fish tank as I was doing this reading of the scenes. But ultimately, even though it is a fantasy book, there are themes of conservation and environmental awareness and kind of what humans are doing to the environment embedded within it, because my goal is not to preach at kids or kind of hammer them over the head with these themes, but to slowly incept them into the story so that you come out caring about the ocean and caring about our marine environments just through reading the books.
So back then, when it got published, when it was quite a success, did you think that's it? I found my career and I will be an author?
I mean, writing has always been my first love. And I think there's different mediums. Some people are completely just brilliant at art, drawing, painting, sculpting, whatever it is, photography, dance, music. My medium has always been the written word. So no matter how much I love photography and I love being creative in that way, I think you probably see that through my captions, is I'll always be a writer first and foremost. But the love of storytelling is really the through line or the thread that holds everything together, all my different interests, my work in the film industry, even photography. I want my images to tell a story. And I think the most powerful photos are the ones that do have a story behind them.
So fast forward, after graduating, you did an internship in the United States and decided to stay. Your first job was at ICM reading scripts and determining if there was enough potential to make them into movies. With your books that were such a success, have you ever considered making it into a movie for young kids? Like
So
Harry
I'm so impressed that you did your research. You definitely did a deep dive there. So they actually have been options before for development. And the thing with the film industry is most things don't get made, unfortunately. There's so much stuff out there, so it just takes time and the right person. But they've been optioned before. There have been people asking. In my personal opinion, I actually think the best version of it would actually be a cartoon series,
Potter.
because of just the fact that the underwater world, it's so rich and you can do so much with animation nowadays. And we actually had cartoon, like graphic novel versions of the novels come out, which are basically they're just easier because the books are aimed at age, like 12 and up, right? And for kids who are 7, 8, 9, and they came and they were like, we love mermaids, we want to read them, but we can't really read a thick book yet. My publishers and I decided to come out with the graphic novels, which were a lot more accessible. It's still the same storyline, the same characters, but it's just a little maybe like less text, and still that wonderful world that you can kind of get to dive into.
Yeah, it's great. And it was in different languages as well. So it's reaching as many people as possible.
The coolest thing is now that it's been 10 years since the first ones came out, but meeting kids back then who have grown up with the books, who are maybe roughly my age, and like meeting them in a completely different context, and somehow the books come up or they put it together and they're like, wait, are you the mermaid girl? Like, are you the girl who wrote those books about mermaids? I like grew up reading your books. Like my mom got them from you, or my sister did, or whatever. And like, oh, I like wanted to, and it's so cool to hear that, or to hear that in some way it might have been a catalyst for them to either get into diving or get into writing themselves and following their dreams. Like, I think it's so inspiring.
So in 2017, your love for scuba diving and photography merged, and it's the beginning of Pier, the underwater photographer. A year later, you took a gap year to explore Africa, a well-needed break far from Hollywood. Was it your first trip on this continent?
It wasn't, but I had only previously gone on organized trips with my family. And I was very, very fortunate to grow up traveling. And my parents just really instilled that love for me. Like, we never really spent money on fancy like cars or luxury items. We were always like putting all the money to travel, but I'd never gone to to Africa alone as a backpacker, or let alone, by myself. So I spent a couple months throughout Southern Africa. So South Africa, um, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Eswatini, Lesotho, and Mozambique, traveling around. And it was, like you said, a much needed break from Hollywood, and something that completely changed the trajectory of my life.
So you went completely out of your comfort zone to film sharks and other exotic species. Why did you decide to do this during your sabbatical year? It's meant to be a break, and you had originally planned to write your new book, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually like to say that, and I'm sure you get this question too, of people asking, aren't you scared? Aren't you scared being in the water with sharks? Blah, 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 all the classic stereotypes that you hear about. I actually used to be very, very afraid. I was actually naturally I was still adventurous and quite naughty and enjoyed like climbing trees and doing all these outdoor sports, but my natural setting is actually quite anxious. And it's not as if I'm unafraid or completely fearless. I think the whole point of it was to face those actual fears and to grow from overcoming what scares you, whether it's something tangible like being with a shark in the water, or something intangible like being alone or being completely independent or learning to completely rely on yourself and no one else. So the trip was primarily to really focus on that and to grow in all the ways and face any kind of fear that I had, like, being terrified of heights and going bungee jumping, despite the fact that I was convinced I was like, logically, I know I'm safe and I probably won't die, but still.
You came back to LA to pursue your career in the film industry, but as you said yourself, this trip had changed you and you eventually decided to take a break permanently. You quit your work to live. Photography became one of the mediums you brilliantly used to voice for marine conservation. Do you remember the turning point that made you decide to use your photography skills to the service of our ocean? Did you witness something so bad or so beautiful you wanted to share it with the world?
I love that you kind of talk about that dichotomy, of the bad and the beautiful, because you see quite a lot of it underwater. On one hand, you can see a beautiful event like, I don't know, a whale shark or a feeding frenzy or something just so magnificent, a pod of dolphins. But then on the other hand, you can also see, sharks with hooks in their mouths, or turtles wrapped up in plastic or anything like that as well. And I still remember the kind of the change in the ocean from the time when I was, your age or younger, and kind of how the ocean looks now in certain parts of Thailand that I was so used to. So for me, I think the main catalyst for a lot of this was an event known as the Sardine Run in South Africa, which is essentially this mass migration of fish that move up the coast. They're sardines, in mass larger than the migration of the wildebeest in the Serengeti even. And with them come the predators that hunt them. So sharks, whales, dolphins, birds, penguins, even seals. You get just like a feeding frenzy of all these animals on these fish and swimming with all of this going around. And afterwards, the ocean is basically sparkling from the fish scales, but it looks like stars, like a galaxy of stars. That experience in such a remote place like the Wild Coast in South Africa, it really, really just changed my perspective on what else was out there, and kind of trying not to just like try to work so hard towards this one future, this one goal that we have in the office, but actually taking a step back and recognizing the larger picture. So yeah, I would say that was kind of the main catalyst. And then after that, I just never stopped.
Hollywood sharks. I saw that on your website. Apparently, okay, it does exist. I
So
did not read that.
Yeah, so there's no official like because we first started off as Hollywood Divers, but there's already a dive shop out there, Hollywood Divers. So I kind of like the play on words of Hollywood Sharks because a lot the inside joke in the industry that is that agents and Hollywood executives are sharks. So we're about merging the gap between Hollywood sharks and actual sharks.
So you are also the expedition leader for Nomad Diving, where you bring people all over the world to dive with marine megafauna. I have to join you one day.
Yes,
What's
please.
been your favorite trip so far, and what is it about the megafauna that you love so much?
Oh my gosh. I mean, for me, so there's a couple. Your background, the one in Bimini is definitely one of my really favorite trips. It's really hard to pick. The sardine one obviously holds a very special place in my heart. I think the Marlin run in Mexico is so much fun. That one is just like beautiful blue water and you can see so many different kinds of animals. So in terms of like going to one destination and just getting all these animals and in like pretty good conditions too is always really cool. But the main thing is just that the goal of Hollywood Sharks, which is like this diving club for Hollywood execs, was to bridge that gap. And was the thing is swimming with marine megafauna, it's really hard to have that kind of experience and then come out of the water and then not care about them, right? Like when you're sharing the ocean with a huge whale or a shark or whatever, and you have your friends next to you, friends or new friends you've made on the trip, and all these people, you come out of the water and you're just buzzing. You're so stoked. Like last year we went to the Marlin run and we were so lucky. We jumped in thinking we were just going to see, the usual like marlins, bait balls. Sometimes you get humpback whales that pass through. We ended up swimming with a blue whale,
Oh
which
my
was
God.
insane. We didn't know it was there. We were like, oh my God, that's not a humpback. That's a freaking blue whale. And coming out of the water, like there's no way you have that kind of experience and then don't care about like that blue whale or don't care about like the species or how they're doing, because sometimes you'll swim with animals that, like there are whales that have, say, infestation of sea lice or have been tangled or have marks and scars in their bodies from running in with boats. Yeah, and so that's the goal, is to bring people on these expeditions to have transcendent experiences so that they go back and be like, huh, maybe I'll donate to an organization. Maybe I'll go join a beach cleanup, or maybe I'll do more for my environment.
Oh, wow. Well, it's definitely a good idea. And that's why so many people are trying to advocate for people to start diving
Mhm.
because it brings them so much closer to the underwater world. And going diving with marine megafauna, I can only imagine. It's my dream. Oh my God.
No, you should definitely come join on an expedition because I'm sure we could use some of your energy and just sharing the love.
So I want to finish up with a quick sort of quiz for Pier, the solo female traveler. So far, you accumulated 93 countries and 7 continents, visited at 28 years old only. You certainly have many stories to tell, but since I unfortunately have to go to school soon, we will keep it to short answers. So do you really just travel with one backpack? Where do you fit all your camera equipment? Because I see it's quite impressive.
It totally depends on the trip. So if it's just a diving expedition, I generally have one really, really large bag with all my gear, especially if I'm bringing free diving fins. You know how hard those are to pack. But when I did my Africa backpacking trip, I actually did this crazy thing where I had one Osprey backpack that was like those big backpacking ones with all of my clothing, even my drone, like all this crazy stuff. And then I had this other little carry-on, this tiny carry-on, where I managed to fit my underwater housing, my mask, my camera, my lenses, all that stuff. And then depending on where I was going, I planned my trip so that I did all the land stuff first, and then I basically used a courier service and shipped my underwater bag to the underwater place, picked it up there, and then traveled with it down the coast.
Oh my
So it was
God.
planned in a way so I could actually bring my underwater housing, which is enormous, with me. But yeah, it definitely requires a lot of planning for sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm guessing. What is the first thing you do when you arrive in a new country? You know no one. What do you do?
I actually really enjoy going on a city walking tour, if it is a city, because it actually gives you a lot of like, it is touristy, but it gives you a lot of context to the, you hear from a local. Generally, they're free and they're just tip based. So that's always really helpful. And if I'm solo backpacking, I really do enjoy staying in hostels, even if you're like not a hostel dorm person, stay in a room that's private, but at a hostel, because then you get the community, you get the experience, you get to just meet a lot more people. And just try to talk to new people and try to overcome those fears. You know, everyone's also like, a lot of people are alone and traveling and looking for new friends as well, and you never know who you're going to meet or the connections you'll make.
Wow, it's been my dream to travel all over the world like you have. And I definitely hope I'll be able to do it one day. And I'll take all your tips that you're telling me right now, meeting new people, making new friends. It's great to have friends all over the world. So what are three must-have items in your backpack when you're traveling?
I mean, this is a really tough one. definitely have a lot of gadgets that I really enjoy. For me, the top one is it's obviously always a camera. I tend to just take my camera everywhere with me, not just like to always record the moment, but more for these snap moments of like unplanned beauty. Those are my ultimate favorites. I generally also, no matter what trip I go on, I tend to try to bring my own snorkel mask, because to me, that's like, if you have your own mask, that just, it's so small, it's so compact, you can bring it anywhere, and it just really
Yeah,
makes the experience a lot better. You can always rent other stuff, but the mask is just pretty
yeah,
important. And then I always carry with me like an emergency toiletry bag with basically like spare change of just everything, plus like medical stuff, medicine, anything that you can need in emergency, just for if you do I don't know, a connecting flight, you miss it, or there's a layover that goes wrong, or you're
yeah.
stuck somewhere, you will always be very thankful to have that emergency bag with you.
Oh yeah, I saw you got stuck recently
Yes,
in
that
the
was definitely
Central
an
American
experience.
border. So going on that, what is the most common problem you encounter during these solo trips?
Definitely the confusion people seem to have when they find out I'm like a solo female backpacker, especially the fact that I think a lot of backpackers you always see are Western or, you know, white. And like, especially in Africa, there was a lot of confusion over like, well, what are you doing here? And like, we
All alone.
never get like female Asian backpackers by themselves. Like, what? Yeah, it was actually pretty funny. Like kids chasing after the car that I was, or the pickup truck that I was in, and they were like yelling the word, the local word there for a white person, looking at the, and then they would like see me and they'd be like, what? Like, what? So that's a pretty common thing. And on top of the fact that I still travel on a Thai passport. So it
Yeah,
is, you know, getting visas, trying to plan ahead for that stuff is always quite tricky.
yeah. Oh, I could never imagine. But if anyone sees on your Instagram, she got stuck recently in Central American borders, but ended up, oh, an adventure is the sum of its misadventures. I read that. Um, it
Yeah.
was, but it was beautiful where you ended up. Um,
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is that experience never would have happened if I didn't get stuck. So you
yeah.
just never know where the wrong turns will lead you.
Um, so what would be your top three tips for women who are ready to take that giant stride into the unknown, like you said in your TED talk? And what destination should they start with?
I would say that, you know, do your research. Like I always say that, like, I don't go in blindly to a place before I go to a destination. Generally, I'll do copious amounts of research. Also download offline Google Maps so that you have a map no matter where you are, even if you don't have a local SIM card or whatever. And I don't mean do your research to death where the place is no longer a surprise, but do your research so you know, kind of the just being overall safe, because there are
Mhm.
dangers out there that are undeniable, especially for a woman. But also trust in yourself, you know, trust in you and your instincts. Your gut instincts generally will never prove you wrong. And really try to trust in your abilities to be by yourself and to do the things that scare you, because I've met so many inspiring women on the road now since I've done that myself, and people who are doing way crazier things than me that I never thought were possible. So that's kind of where I would leave you with that. Just doing your research, but trusting in yourself, and then try to have fun. You know, it's the whole
Oh,
point of the
definitely.
adventure.
The whole point, yeah. What's your favorite warm and cold destination?
Ooh, okay. So cold definitely used to have, I actually used to chase cold places before I chased underwater stuff. So I was a huge fan of Iceland. Antarctica was my probably my all-time favorite
Oh,
destination.
you've been to Antarctica.
Yeah,
God,
I mean, that was, I was very,
everywhere.
very lucky, and just like spending Christmas Day with 250,000 penguins was insane, like a colony of huge penguins. So those ones are my favorite. And then for me, the warm destination, I mean, it gets warm and cold there, but South Africa holds a very, very special place in my heart. And there's just, in terms of a country that has almost like everything and is so diverse, both geographically and culturally, it's like a third home for me now.
Finally, what country is on your bucket list today? If there's any left that you haven't visited.
There are so many, Julia. I don't even know where to begin. I would love to check out. I still actually haven't been to Brazil. I really want to go there. I'd love to go diving in Madagascar. Would love to go check out Western Africa. I haven't been there yet. Like Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria is on my list. Mauritius, sorry, not Mauritius. Mauritania, Mauritius is also on my list. Anyway, the list is never ending. There's a lot of diving destinations and a lot of stories to be told from those places. So yeah, hopefully I get to go soon.
Oh my God, you would. I have a map in my room where you like scratch off the countries that you've been
Yeah.
to. It would be so colorful by now for you if you
Yeah.
scratch off all the countries that you've been to. Hopefully, I'll be able to scratch off a few of my own one day.
I'm sure
And
you will.
well, that's it. For those who want to know more about your journey, go and check Pierre's Instagram and website. You won't be disappointed. Thank you so much for joining me, Pierre. You are a true inspiration for myself, and I'm sure many women and girls. I hope that we will meet one day and dive together. Meanwhile, stay safe and keep what you're doing. And happy Women's Day.
Thank you so much, Julie. This was so lovely. And thank you for
Thank
such
you.
thoughtful questions. I also hope we get to see each other soon and hopefully go on a dive sometime.
Thank you for watching today's interview. What a dream life Pierre has. I hope you feel inspired too, and this is a good reminder that life can and should be full of adventure and getting out of your comfort zone. The world is so beautiful and everyone should get to experience the best of it. I hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Bye.